Okay, it is now my pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker. Alec Griswold has over a decade of experience in the outdoor leadership industry. He is a graduate of the National Outdoor Leadership School. He is the founder of several venture outfitters, including Patagon Adventures and Soulfly Lodge. He is an advocate also for youth mentoring in the Boston area. I think that's the connection to what he's going to be speaking about today, Elevate Youth. The Elevate Youth is aimed at connecting underserved youth with the outdoors, with positive experiences and mentors, and Empower Youth really is looking to help young folks, explore the outdoors, spark a lifelong love of the outdoors. I think many of us, me included, are involved in environmental outdoor recreation causes because we were out in the outdoors as kids, as teenagers, and I think that is one of the reasons why an organization like Empower Youth that you're going to hear Alec talk about is so important to our work. Without further ado, Alec Griswold.
Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here today. Couple thank yous as well. A thank you to the Mass Trails team, Amanda, Libby, and Eli. Always amazing to see what a small yet mighty team can pull together. And I'm sure you are tired and exhausted from the week, but we're excited to be here today. Also want to thank Representative Cicolo for being here and Alexi Conine for all the work that you're doing here in the state of Massachusetts. So thank you. Before we dive in, I work with kids, right? So we're going to have a bit of a kid moment here. And you're like, oh, great. I just came to hear this guy speak, and now he's going to make me do something. But I'm speaking, so I get to do it. So what we're going to do is an icebreaker, right? I'm sure we're all familiar with Zooms over pandemic, but today we are going to do one that is one of my favorites. See if I can get her going here. There we go. So you're going to turn to somebody at your table there, and you are going to ask yourself, if tomorrow morning I woke up as a wild animal, what would I be and why? Okay, and I'll start off to give you a second to think about something. But I'd be a marmot. I'd be a high alpine rodent, I think. Beautiful views, vistas, right? Pretty nice place to live, calm. I think they hibernate for about half of their lives, so catch up on some really good sleep. So I would be a marmot. All right, so I'll give everybody maybe 30 seconds. You can each do yours, and we'll come back. Thank you. If there's enough time, but I wasn't really planning on it, so yeah, thank you. All right. Did everybody, I know you're deep into your animal conversations, so maybe you can pick them up afterwards. All right, I'll give you another 30 seconds. Seems like you're really into it. All right. We'll pick up on our animals. Please, if you see me today, I'd love to hear your animal and a reason why. Obviously, we use this to start any outing or activity with our kids, and it's a great way to break the ice. I will say I've used it at a couple cocktail parties too, and it's a pretty big hit. So not just for kids, right? I'm Alec Griswold. I'm really grateful to be here with all of you today. I'm excited to learn from each of you. I've already had amazing conversations out there in the hall. And that's why we're all here, right? Is to learn and to connect. This year's theme is creating. Was it creating communities and building trails? Yes. So that's what it's all about, right? And community starts right here. And it's so nice, like Amanda said, to be able to gather again in person and not stare at each other through a screen. So a little bit quickly about Elevate Youth. We are based in Boston, work in Boston and Cambridge mainly. We work with kids in low-income neighborhoods and underserved communities, connect them with nature, engage them consistently, and also add, which is a very important part, the adult role model, right? A mentorship component in there. So you really have the experience of the outdoors and then the relationship of having that mentor with you. We work with about over 280 kids right now, built into cohorts, which we partner with schools and other youth organizations. I do have a video here, but Alexi's video is much better, I think. So I'm just going to tell a story, and it's from the very first trip we had at Elevate Youth. This was in the winter of 2018, and we were a couple miles that way at Wachusett Mountain. And of course, first outing, I'm glad I picked skiing as the first one. It seemed, really simple, not a lot of moving parts there. But, I rented a passenger van at that point. I had a part-time employee, and then luckily an amazing group of volunteers, right? And we picked up 14 kids from one of our first partners, Harlem Lacrosse, and we made our way to the mountain. As I was driving, there was a girl, Jade, who I'd never met before, but certainly met that day. She was exhibiting some tough behaviors, right, on the way, and I think we can all relate to the fact that when we're about to do something that's outside our comfort zone, our anxiety comes out in different ways, right? Jade came out very vocal and forceful and was like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be doing this. And I'm driving. I'm like, all right, well, I got to focus on driving, but this isn't a good start. So we get to the mountain. A lot of kids are really excited, but Jade is just not having it. She's like, I don't want to be here. This is not the place I want to be. And I said, all right, Alec, this is your moment. If this is going to work or not, prove it right now. And so I spent the rest of the day with Jade, picking her up, helping her learn the skill of skiing. And I tell you what, by the end of the day, we really had to pull her off the mountain. She was so excited, huge smiles, bombing down the green runs and just having a blast. And she came up to me at the end of the day and said, Alec, that was the best day of my life. And I was like, whew. All right, I think this is going to work. So that really started the journey of Elevate Youth. And what I'm really excited to talk and speak with you about today and listen to everyone today is about how we ignite the passion for the outdoors in our communities, right? I think this room, we all have that passion, which is fantastic, and it's so great to be in a room like this. But how do we spread that beyond kind of the normal folks that love skiing or love getting outside and biking or hiking, whatever it is? So I want to talk quickly about the benefits of nature, right? A little bit of science behind it. Then I want to talk about the barriers that exist, especially for kids in low-income neighborhoods and in underserved communities. And then I want to talk about maybe how we think about breaking down those barriers, leveraging our power in this room and beyond, and sharing that power in order to affect change. So what's the problem? I always think of Seinfeld. It's like, what's the deal? Well, I think there's two pillars, right? Raise your hand if you've heard the term nature deficit disorder. Got some Richard Louv fans in here. All right. So for those that maybe have not heard it, it's a term coined by Richard Louv, an author, back, I think, in 2003 in his book, Last Child in the Woods. And it's really about how people, especially children, are disconnected from the natural world, right? Are not spending enough time outside and in green spaces, and ultimately what the negative effect that has on our youth and our next generation. You'll be able to see some stats here which are really unnerving, right? The amount of time that kids right now are spending outside. So that's kind of the one pillar, right? And we're straying away from our like innate evolutionary roots. That's why I have the kindergarten up here. I was thinking about this. It's like literally children garden, right? And the idea, I think it was a German educator, Froebel, the idea was like a room and then open doors into a garden. And then kids would literally go out and play. Just fully unstructured play, creativity and building and observation, right? We've strayed away from that, right? We're indoors now. It's not safe to go outside. There's too much liability or whatever it is out there. So that's unfortunate. And we need to figure out how we can move the needle back towards saying, nature's fun. Nature's okay. It's okay to get dirty. It's okay to, get a scrape. So that's the one pillar. And then the other pillar is the equity barriers, right? And this is especially important for the kids that we work with and beyond. And really, we'll go into some equity barriers, but equity being, that everybody has equal access to a resource. All people have an equal access to a resource. That's really equity, right? So there's a lot of barriers to that equity that we can go through. Real quick, I know we probably know these, but I just wanted to go through this. So health benefits of nature, right? More and more every year there are studies coming out that put science behind what we all know. When we go outside, we're like, I feel so much better. I don't even care about what's going on over there. It's just better. Well, now there's the science to prove it, right? And I was thinking about this the other day. And everybody in this room is technically a health practitioner. I've never thought of myself really as a health practitioner, but honestly, we all are. No matter what you're doing, if you're building trails, working with kids, if you're in the DCR, a government agency, whatever it is, we're actually health practitioners. We're the nature doctors and nurses, right? We have a prescription pad, and we can give folks a prescription and say, here's a healthier possibility for a healthier life outcome and a happier life, right? But we can't reach everybody with that prescription pad. And you can see some of these statistics here. The one that always gets me, and these may are a little outdated, but not that bad, 4 to 7 minutes outside of unstructured play for the average American kid, right? And by unstructured play, it's not like, sports teams, that's awesome, do that. Just going outside and being a kid, right? That's a really small amount of time. And there's studies that show that really affects the brain of a child and how you are able to process things. So there's a bit of the health benefits. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I think this room gets it. I want to use this quote. Olmsted, I'm sure maybe some of you have heard of him. He was an architect. He did Central Park. Closer to home, he did the Emerald Necklace. But he said, nature employs the mind without fatigue and yet enlivens it, tranquilizes it and enlivens it, and thus, through the influences of the mind over the body, gives the effect of refreshing rest and reinvigoration to the whole system. I thought that was pretty good, old Freddie. And, that's like for years, poets and artists, and we've all been trying to figure out what nature means to us, right? Or what is nature? What is nature's effect on my well-being and my outlook on life? And I'm fascinated by that, right? Like, what's the human component that we're trying to maybe get to, not, consciously sometime, but unconsciously, right? And that is being in awe, right? Wonder, being outside and, looking at something and saying, whoa. And I've got two examples here. This first one I think most of us have seen, the first viral video ever, maybe. This is a double rainbow guy.
Oh, wow! Woo! Yeah! Oh, my. Oh, my. Oh.
I won't play the whole thing. If you're ever having a bad day, please just spend that, 3-4 minutes of watching that. It'll change everything for you. One that's closer to home, this was a trip that we did this fall that was an all-girls trip. Haley here, one of our instructors. Stand up, and Cam, stand up real quick. Round of applause for these two. They're half of my staff. The other half isn't important. I'm just kidding. My staff is incredible. I'm so grateful and thankful for these folks. But it was an all-girls trip. So Sophie, who's not here, and Haley took about 12 girls up to the White Mountains, where we partnered with AMC, LL Bean, and She Jumps, another national nonprofit. Unfortunately, I couldn't go, but that's fine. But supposedly it was the best trip we've ever had. And they got up there on Friday night, but it was dark, right? And they couldn't see anything around them. So this is the next morning when they got up to go to breakfast. So the important part there, I don't know if you could hear it, but it was like the whoa, the wow, like I want to live here. This is incredible, right? Like that's awe right there. That's what we as Elevate Youth try to get to at every single outing. And it's no matter like if it is the White Mountains or the Grand Canyon. We have not been to the Grand Canyon yet, but you know, it can happen right in a schoolyard too, and in the little things like every day. Yesterday I was walking my dog in the city and came up on this like blue jay that was just on a branch, and it just was kind of looking at me, squawking at me, probably squawking at my dog, but and I just had this like 30 seconds, but it felt a lot longer, like interaction with this creature, and it was just like, whoa, that was super cool. So it can happen in these little moments and big moments. And there's a gentleman, I believe he pronounces his name Dochner or Dochner. Keltner, he's not here, so I apologize if I mispronounced it. But he does a lot of studies on awe in nature, and he's based out in Berkeley. And he's come up with this definition: the feeling of being in the presence of something so vast that transcends your understanding of the world, right? And this picture here are 3 of our kids, and you can kind of see it on their face there, and they're just staring at a frog. But it's full on, right? It's like, holy smokes, what's going on here? So awe is a pretty powerful human emotion. I believe it really awakens the mind, right? It has that ability. But it also has the ability to maybe take you, like a transition, take you from like self-interest to an interest in others or an interest in something else, right? And harnessing that power is something that I think could, if we all had a good dose of awe, I'm sure in this world, we'd all be a little bit more empathetic of the differences that exist, right? And so being able to spread that awe, that's what we're here doing, right? And it doesn't matter if you're working with kids or building trails, you're all a part of that. So that's your intro to awe. We're going to come back to awe in a second, but I do want to take a second and some of the lessons that we learned through the pandemic, right? Pandemic was not fun, is not fun, but I hope that everybody had time to reflect on what you do for work or personal and be able to say, wow, I learned some things there, because world changed for sure. For us at Elevate Youth, nearby nature, and for me personally too, right? When I think of nature or maybe outdoor experiences, I want to go skiing or fishing or do something radical, right? That's not it. That's my belief in nature sometimes, right? And I'm a privileged white male. So when I think about nearby nature, it became so powerful because we were forced to do programs in local parks, right? We couldn't do transportation. We couldn't do all of the things that we normally do. So we spent probably a year and change running programs in local parks, and it was awesome, right? We scrambled as a staff to figure out, okay, well, now we really need a curriculum and things to talk about here. But we focused on the little things, right? And bird watching. We had so many organizations that we partner with. They're like, yeah, good luck bird watching. Like, see how that goes. And our kids were so psyched, right? It's like a superpower when you have those binoculars in your hand. So nearby nature, getting young people involved with nature if you start that close at home, you are much more successful on creating that spark for those kids to continue a pursuit of nature, because they can come back and revisit it, right? And even, if there's not a lot of green space around you, you can take nature into the home, right? You build a birdhouse, plant an herb, sketch a tree. So these are all things you can do to interact with nature, and we found that super impactful during this time. Slowing down. We all slowed down during the pandemic, but slowing down to stare at a tree, to say, what does this make me feel? What do I notice, right? And for me as an adult doing that, it can be challenging sometimes, but you start to say, wow, I actually never noticed that. And, wow, that made me feel like that. Having those moments and having kids, especially during this time where they were just cooped up inside and didn't have any social interaction, having them able to do that just came up with some really powerful stuff. And I was like, okay, nearby nature, slow down. These are good things. Family engagement. There should be family and community engagement. But we would have parents or guardians come pick up their kids or walk their kids to the park, right? So we finally had good FaceTime with parents. It's a hard thing. I think anybody who runs youth programming knows family engagement is difficult, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that. But having that face-to-face time, I started creating, and my instructors started creating a real relationship based on trust and based on them learning, okay, what are these people doing with my kids at the park, right? And they're seeing it right there. So that was powerful. And then access. I feel like everybody in this room realized the inequities of access to nature during the pandemic, right? It was highlighted. Yes, maybe some of us could drive and get out to green spaces, but that wasn't an option for the communities that we work with. So it highlighted our mission, and we already knew that, but it highlighted it for a lot of other folks too. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of those other barriers, right? And this is taken from the National Recreation and Parks Association survey. I believe it was done back in 2016. I'd have to check my notes. But you can see these four, and we'll call the fourth at least close to 50%. But 50% of respondents had these four barriers, right? So transportation, that's a tough one. If anybody has an answer to that, let me know. Tell Representative Sicolo too, and we can get on that. But that's a tough one, right? We'll come back to that. But over-programmed, right? Oh, we've got too many things going on. I got some schoolwork or doing whatever. The same thing goes with not prioritizing for parents, right? Why is nature important? Why should I get my kids outside? It's not, we have other things to do. He or she is excited about a video game that they're playing. So these are all real things, and we see it in our kids, but it's not only kids in Boston or kids in Dorchester. This is a nationwide survey, right? So the next one, fear of the outdoors. I remember a kid asking me in the Blue Hills, are we going to see polar bears today? I said, well, I really hope not. I really, really hope not, for a lot of reasons. But so there's that fear of the unknown, right? And the biggest thing that we at Elevate Youth and a lot of other youth programs focus on is the sense of belonging, right, in community. So if you're going to a space that's a predominantly white-dominated space and you don't see anybody who looks like you, that's a tough start, right? So having representation within that space is extremely important. And that is kind of where I want to get to next. First, I do want to get a couple more barriers because these are important too. Lack of programs, right? It's so tough. I've had conversations with some organizations in here, bigger organizations, they're like, we need to do more programming, right? But it's not easy. And it's not easy to do quality programming. It takes money, it takes staff. Technology, I love this. Another Richard Louv quote, he asked some kids why they like spending time indoors, and they were like, well, that's where the power outlets are. They're not wrong. Cost, language barrier, these are also important barriers. Now, let's think about barriers from maybe our side, professionals in the industry, right? And we'll see a lot of the same things here. Limited staff capacity. Again, if anybody has too many staff here, please let me know. I'd love to talk to you about that problem. Cost of programs, we just saw that. Lack of transportation, liability, cultural and language relevancy. So these are the barriers that maybe our organizations or we, whatever we're involved in, deal with, right? So, okay, we know the barriers. What are we going to do about this? If you take one thing out of this morning's speech, collective impact, okay? And I've talked to some folks. I've had some great conversations recently. We are all working technically on the same thing. It's the protection and the preservation, the creation, the love of the outdoors, right? We all maybe have different paths in there, but we're all working towards the same goal. So in order for us to make any sort of change, we really need to focus on collaboration, right? For example, today, I know if you're anything like me at a conference, I'm like, okay, I'm going here, I'm going here, I'm going here. I'm not going to anything else, right? It has nothing to do with me. I challenge you, if you're not a youth worker, you build trails, go to a youth, panel. If you're a youth worker, go to a trail building panel, right? We're here to learn from each other. So the idea behind collective impact is change isn't going to happen with one organization, right? I feel like we can all agree that we have our own silos and we get stuck in that. And that's fine. That's kind of how life is sometimes. But in order to make real system-wide change, you need to be collaborative. And it needs to be aligned and needs to be smart. Now, I don't have all the answers, clearly, but I'd like to explore some. So doing the work. This is the hard part, right? You're like, oh man, I wish I could just, do a conference and then it's all good. No, you need to first do the work internally, right? So it's an internal session first, saying, okay, maybe what are my biases, right? What are the things that I'm not aware of? Or you're like, well, I need some sort of re-education, right? I need to learn more about what this group's doing. Or what different aspects of society that I'm just not familiar with because it's not in my wheelhouse, right? And books and podcasts and documentaries and conversations are all great things for that internal work. And then, once you feel comfortable that you've done some internal work, then you can start thinking external or within your organization. And this is just, I'm only saying this because this is what we do at Elevate Youth. It seems to be working for us as far as, we're a young organization, but, I feel like if you put the time and effort into really putting work in at the bottom level, right, from the ground up, then everything else is going to really make sense. So just some other points here, being vulnerable. Who's Brene Brown? She's got a couple books on that. That is like essential, right? If you're going to be vulnerable, that's where you learn. That's where you can, make change or something happens internally. So go out on a limb, right? Go somewhere else. Go have a talk with somebody while on the trail. It's just being vulnerable can really lead to a lot of amazing things. And then we're going to get into the next thing, but centering community voice. No matter where you are in Massachusetts, you have a community, right? And there are folks in that community that you're not reaching with your specific project or organization. So how do you reach those folks? Well, let's talk about that. These are, These are principles, the Yamez principles. There was it was in 1996, Democratic Organizing Meeting hosted by Southwest Network for Environmental and Economic Justice. And of course, we have a lovely acronym there because we all love acronyms, SNEEJ. But look at these 6 things, right? This is how they came together to say, okay, if you really want to do things in a proper, thought-out way, you need to think about these 6 barriers. So first, being inclusive, right? This is something that we struggle with. I think all maybe environmental focus groups struggle with because we are a white-dominated space, right? We can look around the room. So how do you get diversity or other voices in the room? You need to reach out and get voices and decision makers at the table. And at Elevate Youth, we're trying to do that, but I'm still the lead of the organization, and I want that to change. So how do we go about doing that? Well, you got to spend time in the community and get connected with folks and have real relationships, right? So I guess I'm skipping to just relationships, but that is key. It's not going to happen overnight, right? But creating those strong relationships with folks leads to so much. It leads to change. It leads to change within your organization for the better because you have new voices coming in. Bottom-up organizing, right? So for larger organizations, it's reaching out to new constituencies. It's being able to have that solidified base of folks that's diverse, that has different voices, that comes from different communities, and that's only going to strengthen what you do, having all those voices. Let people speak for themselves, right? Have voices be heard, and then act on those voices. Solidarity and mutuality, collective impact, right? This is where, when we are all working on something, we can say, okay, yes, we want to get this trail built, but we also want to make sure that when the trail is built, that there's people that care about taking care of it, right? And in order to do that, you need to engage a younger generation to do that and to be involved in that process. I had a great conversation with Jared and Holly earlier about their project, right? And getting kids involved in that ground level. They have agency. I'm telling you, you give kids agency, they're going to run with it. And we as adults are usually wrong. They usually have a better answer. So that's a big one, the collective impact, solidarity, mutuality. Self-transformation. Awe, right? That kind of comes back to awe. The ability to say, hey, we're individualist thinking. Let's focus to more of a community-centeredness thought, right? So these are just principles that I thought would be helpful to go over. I know the Sierra Club actually uses these within their organization. But what I'd love to do is talk a little bit about some action items and kind of what we can do or what I think about when I'm looking at, in the city of Boston and other areas. It's making green spaces inviting for all, right? And what does that mean? It means accessibility. And so many great organizations here are doing good work on accessibility, right? But it also means we need to have more programming, right? Kids aren't just going to magically show up, especially from Dorchester or Mattapan. We need to be able to work with a Boys and Girls Club, get those kids out to the trail, and then have a quality program there, right? So that needs to be some sort of training with staff or retraining, right? And I'm speaking of staff as like DCR folks or anybody else. So it's the ability to have a quality program is super important. And then one thing I think about a lot, and I got to give a shout out to the trustees. I met a couple here, and I know Jen's here as well. Their work on Pierce Park 3. It's a park coming out in Pierce Park, East Boston. And, I think we need to think about parks a little more than just a couple benches, right? We need to rethink how parks look, not only for climate reasons, but also to engage communities, especially in the urban area, with real nature and natural spaces. So if you haven't heard of Pierce Park 3, I don't know where the process is yet, but I'll use that as an example because it's cool. It's really, really cool. So that's, making spaces more inviting for all. The one thing I didn't touch on, which is funny because it's what I do, but infusing nature connections in the after-school world, right? It's a simple thing. I was just speaking with a former teacher at Leominster, and she was a science teacher. She was like, yeah, we didn't get outside at all. Like, we had no programming. And there's no programming. I mean, let me back up. There's really good organizations doing really good work, but there's limited programming. We need more. And in order to do that, that needs to be infused within the after-school program and hopefully eventually within the schools. One thing I want to touch on is we all know what nature means, right? It's easy for me to sell you a prescription to nature. But if we're talking to a school administrator, maybe they don't really understand why it's important to be outside. So I want to give you this nugget, and maybe you know it already, but utilize words that they use, right? Oh, well, social and emotional learning, right? It's all there. It's happening. It's not lying to them. You just have to change the way that you speak to them so you can kind of rebrand nature, right? And they're so focused on standardized testing and get everything right that if you can sell it to them and they say, well, yeah, no, it does make sense. We need our kids, more wholesome in looking at things. Then you're on to something. So the next thing, use stewardship. Obviously, this is something that we love. And I think there's, SCA who's here, Green Agers who's here. I'm excited to speak with everybody there. Groundwork Lawrence, all doing amazing work. Look into all these organizations if you don't know about them, because there's ways to partner with what they're doing and engage those kids on what you're doing, right? And if we can't do that, then we might as well just go home, because all the work that we're doing is going to be for naught. We need to engage the next generation, and especially a diverse next generation. I'd love to see more opportunities for kids, especially from cities or urban areas, to have employment opportunities, right? How do I be a park ranger? Well, I don't really know. Well, I guess we got to call DCR up and see what the process is there. How can we get more kids pathways to these employment opportunities? And I think there's an easy way to do that. It's just partnering, right? Collaborating, saying, hey, we work with kids. You guys do this work. We'll manage the kids side. You just do some job shadowing and help empower this kid realize what you do. So youth stewardship is so important, and I'll go back to it again, but youth voice, right? Having a youth voice at the table is so important. So if you're a friends group, or if you're any group, and you don't have a youth advisory council or some sort of youth input into your decision making, you should think about that. And the easy way to do that, too, is reach out to a school. If they have an environmental club, bingo, there's your advisory board, right? And you can expand from there. So the youth voice is so powerful. Embrace technology. I feel like this is a tough one for all of us. I have some social media that I do, but I rely on some of my staff to tell me what to do. But I don't think we should be scared of social media, right? It can be used for some bad stuff, but it can also be used for some good stuff and really foster community. So just think about that. I'm not a proponent or paid by Facebook or whoever owns anything now, but it's a great way to connect kids or communities of where they're at, right? And sending that message. And we've found at Elevate Youth, obviously we work with kids, so it's a playful type message, but be funny, right? It's okay to be a little vulnerable and funny and engage kids or engage other folks. I think we do have this. Let's see if this comes up. This is an Instagram reel. I got it right. We won't have that playing throughout. Okay, there we go. Got to have good music too, right? So obviously we want kids to get off their screens, but we can't say technology isn't there. It is there. So use it to your strengths. All right, you're like, this guy's gone on for too long. I've got one more thing. Advocacy, right? So thankful for having a strong government presence here, but also, this is our point in time to advocate as a unit and a community ourselves. And if we're not advocating for things, at least beyond what we're currently working on, then again, we're not doing ourselves a really strong favor. So I have one action item we can do today, and this is called the Children Outdoor Bill of Rights. I'm a part of an organization called the Outdoor Alliance for Kids, and there's 15 states that they've helped adopt a Children Outdoor Bill of Rights. And you're like, all right, well, what really is that? You can see some examples here, but it's more than a gimmick, right? It comes from a proclamation from the governor of the state that says kids in this state have these rights, right? Not only does that build awareness, but it starts to create accountability at a larger level. So if you have any interest in joining up, and Elevate Youth won't be the head of this, I just want to start putting groups together, but we need to work together to make this happen, and then obviously we need kids, right? We need kids to say what they need. These are their rights. So I'll be around all day, but feel free. We have a little table there and a sign-up sheet. You can do that. One other thing, advocacy-wise, funding. I don't know if I've said that yet in this speech, which is amazing. It's hard, right? We, as a nonprofit, we're all working out of the same pie. And the best way to get maybe larger funding is to partner with larger organizations and go in on something with them, right? Collaborate, share that wealth, literally, and share that power, right? So that was the only other thing I had to say about that. Let's recap. All right, what's my time limit? Am I right? Okay. So embracing awe, right? We talked about that. That's an important thing. I think it's something that I think about a lot because it's the emotion, it's the strongest human emotion that has been determined to be a part of nature. And if you can recreate that in what you're doing, right? And that's not just working with kids, that's a rail trail project, right? Or a bike lane or a shared use path. There's ways to create awe in everything you're doing, right? And I think it's important that we try to be intentional about it as well. And especially with communities and kids who maybe have not had the experience in the outdoors, that's where you need the adult guidance that's going to be intentional to get them to that moment of awe. So remember to embrace that in everything you do. And I hope everybody tomorrow or whenever it looks like it stopped raining, but go outside and enjoy what we have out there. Break down barriers, right? We've talked about those barriers. It's a lot of work. It's not easy. But in order to really make progress, it needs to be collective. So we can start today, right? We can start in these next sessions, these next panels. Start to make those connections. If you're an introvert, grab a business card, email them later, right? Totally fine. Just start making the connections. And that's the key. It's easy to say, but it takes the work. Last thing is inspire. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm a bit passionate about what I do. I love the outdoors, right? I love getting kids outdoors. I love seeing their eyes light up and saying, holy smokes, this is awesome, right? That is I love my job. It's such a gift. And to be able to continue giving that to kids is what we should be focused on and what we could get aligned on, no matter what you're doing, right? Anything you're doing can involve kids. So it's thinking about how do we involve kids? Well, it's partnering with organizations. And then how do we go beyond that? Well, we start creating programs and different things for these kids to get more engaged at a deeper level. I'll leave you with one last thing. I think the best thing we can do for the next generation is to teach them how to love, right? Love themselves, love their peers, and a love for the environment. I think if we can all get behind that, we're going to make some change. Thank you very much. I'm excited to see everybody today. I appreciate your time.